Ladies and gentlemen, may I join with the speakers who preceded me to congratulate Maniram Prasad and the other members of GOGEC for all the achievements they've made so far in such a relatively short period of time, and for the vision displayed by Mr. Prasad in establishing the chamber. Now, in this period, we have quite an information overload. Almost on a daily basis, you read the newspapers, you go to seminars about the oil and gas industry, you have some presentation being made, you have a lot of unsolicited views being in the public domain. So I'm sure in here, most people understand the basics as to where we are going and the challenges that we will face on that journey. And the last thing I want to do is to give you information that you're already familiar with. So what I often do on these talks that I rarely have these days is to try to share with you a policymaker's perspective on how we are confronting the challenges that are laid out for the country, for you in industry as investors, and for the people of Guyana as a whole. So if there is one thing that I keep returning to, one theme, it's a theme of predictability. We believe that every single person in the country, but more so investors, they need to know that you have a government in place that has a vision, that can outline the projects, programs, policies to accomplish that vision, and they remain steadfast in pursuit of that vision, consistent. So predictability is very important for every single one at a corporate level when you're planning investments and at people's in their daily lives. And if there is one thing that we in the People's Progressive Party have done is to try to throw the years from the beginning, Mr. Bagwan did mention, it is laying out the path to the future that we want to accomplish. We have not just done this now, as he pointed out. We have done this over the course of the past 20 years in various documents. The poverty reduction strategy, the national competitiveness strategy, the low carbon development strategy, etc. And they've all established that bright new day in the future and what we need to get there. The reason why we could not accomplish that faster is the lack of resources, and the challenges were different. As you know, in the early period, the challenge was to restore solvency to our country from a bankrupt country that was using too much of its resources to service debt. Today, we've returned to that vision, but we can accelerate its accomplishment because the resources are available. And so I would urge people to read the old documents too. You will see that lots of the things that we are pursuing today, they were laid out 15 years ago. It's not new. Now, when I said predictability, we all know that this is a young, new industry in Guyana. So we would have a challenge of capacity, particularly at the state level which has a limited capacity in almost every area, but more so in regulating a fledgling industry. And so we recognize that in opposition, and we urged the government then to pay more attention to this issue. We thought they were not addressing this in earnest because we knew from 2016 that we would be producing oil and gas. Investment decisions had been made. So in opposition, we said we defined the things, the framework that we will work on. And we didn't do it just like how we have opposition today. We just say we want to do this. We also outlined the principles that we'd follow in pursuing these changes. So when we said first of all, we had to have a modern petroleum act because the last one was done in 1986. And we pointed out some of the deficiencies in the old act that would not allow you to regulate an oil and gas industry in 2022 when it was enacted in 1986. And we pointed out the areas that we are going to fix. We are just, before the end of this quarter, we will change that act. We already have contracted an international company to work with us. We've had some engagements with the minister from Qatar when he came here, and they're deploying someone to work with us to ensure that we have a modern act that can that is fit for purpose in the modern era. That's the first thing we said we'll do. Secondly, there was controversy about the PSA. And there were a number of areas identified by the public, NGOs, many others. They believe that Guyana was not getting a fair share of the total revenue. We said we had difficulties about the PSA in a number of areas. And we outlined some of the areas about ring fencing, the level of royalty, taxation, and how much was going to cost recovery. We committed in opposition that we will fix these areas. We have recently announced the changes in the fiscal term for the new PSA that would be applicable to the contracts that we sign going forward and to all of the agreements excepting for the Stabroek block. And we said, in opposition to, we are not convenient about it. We didn't use it as a political tool to campaign. We said, we are not going to renegotiate the Stabroek block. We remain faithful to that commitment, but we had said at that time that any other production agreement will have to reflect the new fiscal terms that we will determine. And we have determined that 65% for cost recovery, 10% royalty, 10% corporate tax, and a 50-50 share. We did not do it in the party headquarters at Freedom House. We hired an international firm, IHS Markit. We work with them in an iterative manner by sharing different configurations in these 4 areas that I mentioned. And they did all of the simulations. And then the simulations that were done, we said there's one principle which we outlined in opposition to. We said that the new fiscal terms will give a greater take to the country, but will ensure that the investors who come here, because we need, as Alistair pointed out, we need more investments to develop these resources, that the regime will remain attractive and competitive. And one of the terms of reference for the IHS market was to not only do the simulations, but to show us how attractive on a scale compared to other countries the new fiscal terms were. And they concluded that the terms I mentioned were very, very attractive even in this era. So we did not do that in-house. We sought the best advice, and that is how we made the changes. So we made the changes as we said we will, following the same principles we outlined in opposition to the PSA. We said also we would rewrite the whole the PSA so that it reflects a modern, it can be compatible with the new act, and that is being done at this point in time. We said in opposition again that the method of awarding plots or blocks in the past had to evolve. Now we are a country that is a producing country. In the past, we never had a bid round. It was based on applications to the ministry or the GGMC that we will launch a bid round for all future blocks. And within 2 weeks, given the work that we're doing now, we will launch that bid round. And as you know, 14 blocks will be tendered. So we remain consistent, as I said, predictable. In opposition, again, we said we will work on a local content legislation, because although we are not going to touch the Stabroek Agreement, renegotiate, that we believe that through 2 projects, we will be able to yield more benefits, if not to the Treasury, to the country and to the people of the country. And that is through a local content legislation. And we spoke about what we would like to achieve there. We did that too. In December of last year, we passed local content legislation. And the second way of helping to rebalance some of the benefits was through the gas to energy project. And as you just heard, we've been working at this, and sometimes people don't realize how much work it takes to put together a big project like this. You hear a lot of glib talk in the public domain, and everyone could do simulations. Half of the time they do simulations and financial projections without any real basis to do so. I've heard, I was on one program, and a gentleman said, the Kiteshore News, that why do the gas to energy when you can generate power at 3 cents per kilowatt hour through solar? And that may be so. So I said to him, well, why don't you bring someone who would sell us at 5 cents per kilowatt hour? We'll buy all of it. And he was supposed to do so within a month. Until now, we haven't heard that. We haven't heard a single word out of them. So you hear a lot of that, but a lot of effort and a lot of policy time has been put into this. We're on the verge of hopefully concluding the contract before the end of the year, and that too will be done as we said in opposition. So one thing you can rest assured about, that once we say it, we are going to get it done. And we're going to do this in a manner to create the infrastructure, the regulatory structures for the oil and gas sector in a manner that is fair to investors and and also to the country. That this concept of shared prosperity that Exxon was using too, that we give basically teeth to it, that we make it a reality. There is no xenophobia in government. We don't hate foreigners. Sometimes you think, or some people surmise, because of the controversy over the local content qualifications or eligibility, some people conclude that maybe there are tinges of xenophobia in the government. That's not so. But we also believe that people should not think that they can walk all over us. They must never think that. And so we're always going to work to ensure that our regimes remain fair, open, and predictable. That's the first thing I wanted to say. Secondly, Alistair pointed out that we're very early in the industry, about 2% on the production side of potential reserves of the 11 billion barrels of proven reserves. So to ensure that the momentum in the economy lasts for the next 15 years, we have to, in the government, have a clear plan to allow this to happen. Because you rely on that momentum for the investments that you will make. I've seen other countries, they've licensed a few operations, and they believe that you have high growth in that period, and that's it. If you don't keep getting more exploration going, or being attractive on the exploration side, or on the production side, and be supportive of future investments, you can keep the momentum. So when we say we are going to license as many FPSOs that Exxon, or the new arrangement, the EP, I always, it's too many P's in that. Let me stick with Exxon. They submit to us. It is particularly because we have that in mind. Because if you keep licensing the new investments, then the spin-off on local content, you can sustain it. The construction boom, the development of services, the maturing of these services, etc. Because that's the supportive environment. And so we have that in mind. We're keeping that constantly in mind as policymakers, that we have to get enough activities offshore and in the oil and gas sector in the future, the next 15 years, to sustain all of the things that people are currently, particularly the locals, are currently benefiting from. That is important for us because it could evaporate swiftly if you don't have exploration activities or production activities, new ones all the time coming on stream. A lot of the momentum could evaporate. And that is something I want you to understand as an energy chamber, as an oil and gas chamber, that it is important for the policymakers. And so when people think, oh, we're too liberal, why would the government say, oh, you want more explorations now? Or the government wants people to accelerate exploration. It's precisely because of that. The third thing is that we know that as we build the framework, there are some areas that we're still deficient in. And we have almost pushed those to the second phase of reform. So whilst the audit capability of the government, strengthening the regulatory agencies, particularly the EPA, enhanced monitoring of the operations of the oil and gas companies, these are badly needed now. But from a policy-making perspective, it's not as though we've forgotten these. So sometimes in the media, you would think, when you see the news articles, that we pay no attention to this. They're not forgotten. They just will happen maybe at a little later stage because our priority is on fixing the framework for managing the sector, which we promise, because that is critical at this point in time. So at some point in time, you will see a return to this. A lot of talk about revenue and simulations against revenue and how much money we're getting. So the resources, yes, are modest at this time. Those, the revenue to the country and particularly to the treasury in the outer years will grow significantly. So there's always, Joel, always a timing issue. At this stage, it's modest compared to our needs. And sometimes expectations are built based on this lack of a nuanced understanding that there's always a timing in revenue flow to the treasury. And you have to meet the needs and address the issues to coincide or to match the timing flow on the revenue side. So you would hear extremist views, you hear from abroad, oh, the country is going to receive X billion, $50 billion. And in some sections of the population, they think you already have the 50 billion US dollars. And you hear the opposition say, spend all of this and then don't spend too. They're confusing positions. What we're saying is that right now the flows are modest. In the future, they will get larger. So our infrastructure program, the plan we laid out to transform the country that will support the oil industry and the non-oil industry too. The infrastructure, what you hear a lot mentioned about. They have to coincide with those flows because we made one commitment in opposition that we are not going to pledge future earning to raise money. Our capacity to borrow has been greatly enhanced. Today, our debt to GDP ratio is projected for 2022 at about 24.5%, down from 900% of GDP when we started this journey. So it's one of the lowest in the world. And we're using maybe 6% of revenue now to service external debt. Our capacity to borrow has been greatly enhanced. Recently, the OECD reclassified us into a category that allows us to borrow cheaper because the risk profile of the country has been reduced. However, we have made it clear that financing, we'd have to look at sustainability, debt sustainability in every one of our investment decisions. And that is why if you look at our borrowing so far, we have not contracted until now any variable interest debt. We don't have any variable interest debt in our stock of debt at the national level, publicly guaranteed or contracted directly by the government. So interest rate increases globally will not create a big shock in terms of servicing these debts. As we go forward, we may have to change this policy. It was a very conservative approach as we move forward. But until now, even in the loan that we're looking for in the bridge and the hospitals that we're building, they're all the 7 hospitals and the bridge across the river. Those are all be on fixed terms. So that is very important for us. And then we have to look into the future, because if you look at the OECD Development Assistance Committee, the countries that are eligible for ODA, we're already on the verge of graduating out of that. So it's the upper middle income countries are considered countries with a per capita GDP of between 4 to maybe 12,800. And we're already this year, it's projected that Guyana's per capita GDP will be about $18,000, which will grow to about 35,000 before the end of the decade. So that is like half of the per capita GDP of the US. So we're already on the verge of graduating out of terms for development assistance. So when you hear a lot about, oh, we're borrowing too much, etc., we're not. That is central to our thinking. Every debt, every bit of debt that we contract has to go through a rigorous testing. And every project that we implement has to have a value to the country and to the people of this country that far exceeds the cost of the loan. That's a rigorous process internally that we manage. So don't think it's glibly done. So I've seen some people talk about, oh, from the opposition, oh, we are contracting a lot of debt and all of that. It's not true. It's not true. Because we are painfully aware of how a liberal policy of contracting debt can lead to the bankruptcy of a country. And that is what happened in the past. So fiscal prudence is very, very important for us. And in your planning decisions that you make at the corporate level or wherever else, that you need to factor that in, that you have a government that will do just that. We're working on some other major things that we promise that will supplement. We have to create a space globally. Nationally, I think people are now growing more supportive of the industry. There was a period where people locally felt that they were not benefiting from the proceeds of the industry. As more people get hired and more local businesses start supplying goods and services to people, that perception will change. And then the advocacy work that Maniram and the others are doing through GOGEC can help people to understand more about the industry. That would definitely help. Training, the government has a massive training program to build the capacity of Guyanese to take advantage of the opportunities in the sector. So we've seen a bit of a change from the early days in opposition when all people were hearing about was the 18 million signing bonus that was hidden about the industry. And that was one thing else we planned, we said in the framework, I forgot about that we'll fix, which is the use on the sovereign wealth fund, that we will repeal or reform the legislation and we'll criminalize non-disclosure. We did that, and so every Guyanese at the end of this year, you will be able to, if you go and buy copies of the local gazette, you'll be able to add how much, long before the Minister of Finance goes to the Parliament with the new budget, you will be able to know how much money we receive from the oil and gas companies. And you'll be able to calculate in next year, applying the formula that we put, how much money will come from the Natural Resources Fund to the Treasury. Every one of you can do that. In the past, only one person would have known that, the Minister of Finance. And if the Minister of Finance doesn't do that now, put it within 3 months in the official gazette, he could go to jail for 10 years. We promise that. So that is important for us, very important. The use of, and people will, the confidence in Guyana will grow if they know that with the money that comes in, they all know about it, where it's being spent. So a lot of it is being spent now on infrastructure. This is critical for us. The infrastructure is necessary not for the oil and gas industry. It's to support the new wave of non-oil and gas growth that we have to have if we want to have our country remain diversified in its economy, not totally reliant on the oil and gas sector. So the infrastructure we are putting in is not to support oil and gas alone. It is the hospitality industry, agriculture, everything else, where a lot of effort will be placed to maintain a diversified economy. So sometimes we have big controversies over this issue. Recently, there is big furor over the, the cost of the currency, US dollar. And the private sector did a survey, I think Timothy Jonas and the other, not Timothy Jonas, Timothy Tucker and the others did surveys, and they said, oh, we're not getting enough currency on time and stuff. But as policymakers, we have to balance this issue. We have not only the variable to ensure that the importers get foreign currency at a lower rate, which they're always interested in, but by allowing a massive flow of foreign currency through the system, we can have those rates fall to a level that would kill off the exporting sectors, the dreaded Dutch disease. So I asked the guys who are from the importing part of our country, the businessmen, that they need to understand that this is happening and that the central bank cannot intervene. When the central bank intervenes when there is a mismatch between aggregate demand for currency and aggregate supply, not when there is when these fragmented markets don't reach equilibrium. So what happens is that some of our banks, they have a cambio license, but they only sell currency to their customers. So we have 10 or 15 different markets. The way a cambio license should operate is you should buy and sell currency to everyone. So they need to either have better interbank kind of purchases or trading, but they're not operating the cambio the way it should be. And so in a bank, say a bank X, their customers can't get money because they have a supply problem there. But in another bank, they have excess currency. And we can't intervene in that sort of situation with central bank. Look, and anyhow, I'm branching off. I saw Timothy here, and that thought just went off. I was dealing with the Dutch disease. So let me come back to that. So the Dutch disease. So there are lots of balances we have to strike all the time at the policy making level. And sometimes we don't come out often enough to speak about this. So when the debate rages in the media, they don't understand why at the policy making level we have to look at this. On the infrastructure side, again, we're doing good quality infrastructure, but we're looking at low maintenance type of infrastructure. We're thinking long run. Many third world countries put up these modern things, and then when the revenue flow ceases, or say if we have a sustained period of low oil prices, what happens then? You can't maintain the infrastructure, or you're in big problems there. So let me just come to a few things, and I will end here. One is that's on the oil and gas sector. We're advocating fixing the problem locally. People are getting more involved on the capacity side. We hear about the capacity, shortages of labor in some sectors. We have been responding to this by allowing more people to come in, but again, like the balance we had to strike there, we have to strike a balance between immigration and some people who are still looking for jobs in this country. Often because of geography, the jobs don't go to their communities in the outer regions. So we're going to have a very balanced policy. At some point in time, we can step up on the immigration because a lot of maybe Guyanese would have been saturated, the market there. But right now, we still have quite a few unemployed people, and the government has had to even gone in with a part-time job program to absorb some of that labor in some of the outlying areas in Region 10, and 6, and 2, where people still, the oil and gas sector has practically not touched their lives. And they're going to be finding out, why are you importing an unskilled laborer when I can get a job in my country, but I live in Linden or I live somewhere else. So that's the balance that we constantly have to strike. We have to buy the capacity and bring in capacity. There's no shame or pride to bringing in any capacity from abroad if we don't have it, capital, capacity, etc. in the short term. But as we grow that. So we're very conscious about that. At the global level, we are working with groups of countries to ensure that we create a framework that takes account of the justice argument on climate change, a framework that takes account of the future and the per capita needs or GDP of the developing world when we make decisions about fossil fuel. Because sometimes the decisions that are being advocated for or pushed by some countries and some NGOs, the world will still need the fossil fuel for a long time to come, given what we have seen now. Would need fossil fuel, the demand is far outstripping any supply of renewable energy to take up that demand at this point in time. So they would need it, but it just wouldn't get produced in developing countries. And so we'll miss out from a whole range of opportunities and will keep the industry mainly in those countries that are currently producing. And so we can't accept that. And we will fight globally to ensure that you have a accommodative policy while still doing our bit and strengthening our commitment to net zero. We have already made it clear we support net zero, we support removing subsidies from fossil fuel production, we support an early decarbonization, but if there is growing demand globally, then we have to be part of that supply chain. Our people and countries like ours, Suriname, Guyana, and others, they have to find a place in that market. So we are advocating the longer that happens, or if we follow the justice argument, the production can shift to countries like ours, and we'd have a longer period for production in these countries like ours. So we have to be part of that framework. Secondly, we need the money to help to make us more climate resilient. The development needs, I don't think when Joel Bagwell talked about $13 billion, he even considered the massive sums needed for adaptation to climate change because of where we live, the coastal level, the need to manage water and the sea against already irreversible changes that will take place, whether you get to net zero or not, whether there's a trend to 1.5 or not, you're going to have the consequences of historically accumulated greenhouse gases in the atmosphere. So that's going to happen, and we need some of the oil and gas resources to help us on the adaptation side to be more climate resilient. But something else we've been working on that will provide some of the resources. If you see, the president has just invited some people to a launch on Friday. It would be the first sale of our certified carbon credit, ART certified carbon credit. In 2020, when we got back into office, we made it clear, even in opposition, how we're going to treat the climate issue. We thought we had 5 lost years under the PNC, under APNU. What they did, we never had a success agreement to Norway, nor they used some funds that we had earned from Norway to create a green state strategy, but it had no possibility of earning money. So we said we're going to reverse all of this. We quickly worked on an expanded low carbon development strategy. And in 2020, the US and others were through the LEAF coalition, and then the architecture for REDD+ transaction was established, and we made an application for them to certify our credit. In the past 2 years, we've been working. Tomorrow, they would certify over $30 million of credit. We'd be the only country in the world that would have ARC certified credit, that is the architecture for REDD+ transaction, in the world. And we had gone to the market already. We had a request for proposals. We've received those, and the first sale will take place. And we are hoping ultimately, so it will be from credit from 2016 all the way from 2016 back, because those were the legacy credits that we applied for. And it will bring in, hopefully, billions of US dollars, the sale of forest carbon that can then be used for adaptation. So it's a massive thing that we've worked on, pursuant to the commitments we made in opposition again, and that's on the verge of being the first transaction, first big sale will take place. We signed the agreement on Friday. So it's something to look forward to and to read up on, because it puts us in there. We're working on the digital economy too, because we believe that the whole infrastructure, we liberalize the telecom sector. We hope that that could be as supportive if we have a modern grid and clean, reliable power, and the roads, bridges, and the ports ready, and broadband technology across the country, bandwidth across the country, that we need to now layer this on with a number of things to support a digital economy. And so we're working on that. I just came from the Middle East, and we're looking, in the matter of months, we're going to start moving in the first step. I mentioned it before, to have a national ID card with all biometrics that will support an electronic passport that is safer, more reliable. More countries will accept it, to revolutionize the airport with it by next year, e-gates and everything else. And then the database would allow us to also enhance our security. We're working now to lay out cameras with facial recognition across the country, that it would allow our banking sector to now use the data and the biometrics to feed into that, to have more secure banking apps, mobile ID, etc. So we're working on that too. These are the building blocks separate, but a whole range of issues on the health and education side, different modules. So I just wanted to share with you today that we're seeing this as a whole limited capacity, but we're working on separate building blocks, and then we're connecting them all. Oil and gas, digital economy, massive investment in the social sector infrastructure, and trying to connect them all. So I hope that this would give you at least a little bit of the thinking and what's happening behind the scenes now. There's a big engine room working around the clock every day to try to get these things done in a short period. We've just been 2 years in office, and so a lot of this has happened already. Thank you very much.